Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you this morning?
I'm all right. How are you two doing?
We're fine. I know you're doing well, but how are you?
Yeah. I'm kicking right along.
Excellent, excellent. So how did it go for you guys last Sunday?
I think it went all right. We were talking about is this a thing that's possible to do in the world? Is it possible to shift our ways of being from this way of the old world into the new world? And what's the cost in particular?
Interesting.
And, once you start talking about cost, people ask questions. Is this a thing we're actually capable of doing? Can we decide we are going to work for love over violence, kindness over control, all of these sorts of things? Is that a sustainable thing in the world that we live in? And honestly, sometimes the answer is no. And that certainly is the thing that comes up, right? We have to actually choose to do this. We have to choose kindness in a world that does not treat kindness well. And I don't know, I'm not really thrilled about that as an idea.
Yeah. We concentrated more on the personal, still looking at the individual and how we navigate the world in all its differences. We started talking about personal relationships, how often in marriages one family gets chosen over another family, just due to sometimes geographics, sometimes personal negotiation between the families, specifically mixed denomination families.
Sure.
Or mixed religious.
Mixed religious families, and how that kind of started the basis of our conversation. It was brought up early. Have a family that has a Muslim daughter-in-law, and learning how to negotiate. And then there's a physical difference in the family. And then this
physical separation.
Physical separation. They're in another state.
Yep.
The family members are in completely different states, thousands of miles away. And so they're feeling not only this physical separation, but emotional separation. And then how do we manage that? How do we come together as a family still when we do come together and negotiating those relationships? And we talked a lot about finding common ground, keep remembering to keep open hearts and minds, and finding that commonality and finding space to honor each other, honor what you believe, and honor what is important to what other people believe that you may be communing with.
It was interesting to me how quickly, because we started out, of course, talking about church, and how, and we've talked about this before, how you see in the letters of Paul, it really starts out as this, we're so successful and all these new people are coming in, and very quickly it becomes, well, crap. How do we deal with all these new people? And of course, very early on in Acts, you have this conflict between the Hellenizers and the Judaizers, but Hebrews. In this week's text, we look at Acts 6. And you guys talked a little bit about Acts 6 last week, and I made some comments on it on the video. But I think it was kind of interesting how quickly it sort of went from, we talk about wanting more people to come into the church, but that's going to mean change. And that, and it's not like this has never been a problem before, because it's right there in the text. We are inviting people in, and we want them to like it exactly the way we do it, right? And that's not compromised. But it was interesting how quickly it sort of shifted from that to thinking about some of these personal issues that people have had in their families, because of course, I don't know, this might be something to pursue a little bit later. What you have is a a society which is much more diverse than the church in many cases. It's not this true of all cases, but so that the issues that people are dealing with. Well, my son married a Muslim, or my son married a Filipino woman, or there were conflicts at a wedding because someone wanted to bring their same-sex spouse and someone else was like, absolutely not, right? Yeah. So you have all of these conflicts that people are dealing with the world, and so making that how does the world deal with it? Right? Not always well. No. But then how do we deal with it? I thought what was really interesting is in these personal stories, I was sort of thinking this, it's like if I was doing a sermon on this, these are the points I would have brought up, because one person was like, you really have to come at it with an open heart. You have to be open to people, and then the next person said compromise. If you're having dinner, and right there, Book of Acts. If you're having dinner, and your daughter-in-law is Muslim, you don't serve bacon, right? But maybe you do some sharing of food, right? You don't have to have all, you don't have to have all one food one time and different food. You can mix and match food. You can do Thanksgiving as a multicultural sort of thing. We used to do Thanksgiving in our house, and our favorite Thanksgiving food was my friend Philip, who's Chinese. He would bring bacon fried rice.
Okay.
Now, every word in that is delicious.
Yes, absolutely. Everything's better with
But together it was like, and you know how some people are like, I want the creamed green beans with the crunchy stuff on top, and I still want those, but also bacon fried rice.
Bacon fried rice. Well, and you've picked a particular series of things here, which my brother-in-law, he married a woman who was of Filipino descent. And so when we go to Thanksgiving at their house, that's what we have, is we have a giant turkey and sometimes a giant ham, and then also lumpia and all of the other Filipino dishes as well, and that's fine. And then Jennifer's cousin also will bring red hot salsa from New Mexico, where she was raised. And so it's a very interesting thing where we have all of these things all together, and it all works. If you've never had chili sauce on turkey, you should try it.
Oh, yeah.
It's very, very good.
Yeah.
And so this experience of saying we can take these family issues and say this is not an issue. We can work together in this way. That's training for how we do this in the church.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Because the church is a family.
Yes.
I hope so.
I mean, the church is a family in the sense that, and this is something that we brought up a little bit in our service, it's like, we all have families in which we love each other even if we don't like them.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's the way the church is. We have to figure out how to love each other even when we don't always like each other.
Without mentioning names.
Because we all know who they are. Sometimes I'm afraid it's me.
I think it was also, we also talked about the boundaries and when we have to say, I can't do that. Yeah. That's the line in the sand. That's something I won't cross whenever it comes to interpersonal relationships. And it really helped us really solidify what the values within our congregation are.
So there's that point where compromise becomes accommodation. Because accommodation is the term that we've been using here a lot to talk about how do we slip into those ways of the world which are counter to the ways of the church, which are counter to the ways of God. And I get the feeling that it is a much fuzzier line than we want it to be.
Yeah, well, because it digressed into, talking about political spectrum a little bit, and the choices that we are forced to make economically or personally because of job or whatever, and reconciling that in interpersonal relationships, especially in this day and age.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that the interest, I like to scribble notes.
She's a note taker.
Two things that came to me as just now as we were talking about boundaries and accommodation is, in one sense, we're all resident aliens, right? This goes back to that idea of, okay, that we're living in this culture but not of this culture. Where is the line? Where is the compromise? And there's a fuzziness, but that's the point. It is a fuzziness. It's not like here's the line and it's solid, and we never do that. As we learn more about ourselves and learn more about our culture and learn more about the world, what we're called to be, and live more together in this community, where those lines are change. One of the difficulties is, and this is what I see, and I don't want to say the church out there, I see that in all churches right now, is that where we are choosing to draw the lines is idolatrous. And I mean idolatrous in the sense that we are picking earthly things and saying this is the line, right? And all of these studies have shown that people will choose a church that aligns with their political commitments, right? So you've got the Republican church and the Democratic church, idolatry.
Yeah.
Right? If your line is, I won't go to church with anyone who voted for Donald Trump or anyone who didn't vote for Donald Trump, that's idolatry, right? And those are where the lines are. Where the line should be has to do with what we're leading up to, right? Should have to do with how is this the gospel? The line is the gospel. If what someone is doing is contrary to the gospel, then that has to be the line that you say, no. And not that I'm not going to burn you at the stake. Those days are not completely gone, but I hope they are. Right?
They're more gone than they were.
They're more gone than they were. We don't do it anyway, so we're not going to burn people at the stake for being wrong about the gospel, but I think that's the place where the conversation has to wait, right, until we can find some common ground, figuring out where to find the common ground. And I think this is where the third thing that came up, and this is what Terry brought up, that what's important in this process is curiosity.
Yes.
Right, and that was one that would not have popped into my head.
Right.
Is being curious about the other person. You, and that's one thing that's so missing, right? And this is, boy, I totally disagree with you about that.
Tell me more.
I'm curious.
Why
Why do you think that? Because you seem like a reasonable person, and curiosity
and reasonable people think like me.
And reason because I am. I looked up reasonable
as.
I looked up reasonable in the dictionary and it said, Lisa, don't bother.
That's fair.
Because you already know.
Yeah.
No, so this concept of understanding that there are different reasons, there are different, why do you serve this on Thanksgiving? Why do you serve it with this? I mean, it can go with food, but also, why are you making the choices that you make? And I think, and I'll take one more thing, and then I probably won't stop talking for a while. But there's this sense that the purpose of our conversation is for me to change your mind.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not. The purpose of our conversation is to be the church. And what are we when we are the church? We are people who talk to, I have said this to my congregation again and again and again, I will talk with anyone who will talk with me.
Yeah.
And I'm not doing it because I expect to change their mind. I'm not doing it because I expect to have my mind changed. I'm doing it because they are my brother or my sister or whatever, and having a conversation with them is what I am called to do as part of the body of Christ.
Having a conversation with them is one of the ways we say, I love you.
And it's one of the ways we say we. Conversation is how two I's become a we.
Yes.
So
there's a thing that tracked into my brain about curiosity that I want to detail a little bit more. So thinking about curiosity, especially curiosity about, say, religion. We both have religious studies degrees, so obviously we have studied religions that are not ours. Mm-hmm. And in the classroom, that curiosity is expected and normal. Mm-hmm. And somehow in a pulpit, curiosity is not. So what happened in between those two things where we can go, oh yes, we'll go be curious about these things in this zone, and then we will ignore curiosity over here.
Well, I don't do that, so.
Yeah. Well, I think that a lot of us have, though. And I know that, again, we've done, this was years ago, but we did an entire series of not Bible studies, but classes, as it were, about religions around the world. What are they all? And people showed up for those very curious. They wanted to know about what's going on in these things. Why are Scientologists, which is a whole separate question. Right, but there's that curiosity that shows up that doesn't necessarily show up in other places. And so that's an interesting thing.
I think that's really interesting, and that goes to some of the feedback that we're getting within our community, our church community, in doing this as a discussion rather than us telling.
Lecture.
So it makes me wonder if it's sermon, not a lecture professor. You know, and my question back to many of them is, what is your expectation? And so then does it become, which was the cart and which was the horse? Historically, that created this, you are at the pulpit, you're going to tell me what to do this week, versus, as Lisa has mentioned, how do we ingest this and make ourselves part of the living word when we move out into the world? And how do we challenge ourselves? And whenever I've talked to my son and his friends and everything who are unchurched, and they talk about how they don't feel like there's that openness of questioning and welcoming of different viewpoints in their, you know, 18 to 25-year-old world. And so how do we break that barrier?
And this is one thing that's kind of interesting in the UCC, and I think that there's perhaps some resonances in the Lutheran Church, because the UCC, of course, is the coming together of several groups, most of which were Congregationalist, but then there's a gaggle of Reformed. And Reformed, like Lutherans, have a lot more clergy reverence.
Yes.
Yeah, and so there's more of an emphasis on education, and there are other strains other than just the Reform, but there's some of the branches have more of an emphasis on education, more of an emphasis on the authority of the pastor, and so part of it is you know where the authority comes from and how it's spread out, and I think the interesting thing for me in my own progress is, I mean, I'm kind of used to being an authority, you know, and you know, sometimes I have to remind myself that when I'm preaching a sermon, I'm not giving a lecture, but yeah, we had a small revolt in our congregation over too much small group discussion, and realizing that we weren't really providing enough context and background, weren't letting people know where they were going, and trying to at the same time reassure them that we had no specific destination in mind. So
they wouldn't know where we're going, but we don't know yet.
But that question of
I can see the anxiety.
Yeah. You know, I mean, they're and I don't want to say fear of change. It's like I feel like there's a change coming and you're not telling me what it is.
That kind of anxiety.
And I'm sort of, and I had to reassure them, no, there will be no liturgical dance.
Unless we all decide together that that's what we want.
And you know, trying to figure out.
Is this where you're going to assert the authority and say no, we're not doing that?
But but also getting away from this idea that we come to church just to check a box. We feel good about ourselves and set our Sunday up and our week up by I went to church.
Liturgical apple a day.
But and I think, I mean, I'm sure that there are people that are there to check a box, but I think that sometimes I'm there to check a box, but you know, but there are, I think some of the anxiety has to do more with, this is my community, right? This is my community. I feel comfortable. It's affirming for me to come here, and I worry that people are going to come in and it's going to make me uncomfortable, right? And I think this is that sort of that kind of travel thing. And you know, when I was young, I'll sleep on a couch, I'll sleep on the floor, I'll do everything.
Absolutely.
You know, I come in now, the first thing I do is I check that bed. You know, is this bed gonna be comfy?
Gotta lay on it, you know, roll around.
And I have to say that when I travel, and I do travel a lot, I have like the first sometimes the first half hour or hour, and sometimes for the first couple of days, I hate my hotel room.
Yeah.
Because it's not the hotel room that I wanted it to be. The bed isn't quite right, and I have to stumble over them. And then usually by the time, by 3 or 4 days, because I walk, I
You've
walk.
nested.
I've nested. I know where my stuff is. That it feels comfortable. And at that point, I think, I could stay here. And then I want to. If I come back, I want to stay in this hotel because I know where everything is, and I know if I turn left, I can go there, and if I turn right, I can go there. And I'm saying hi to the bell clerk, and I know where all the good breakfast food is, and so there's all of those sorts of things. And I think you can make the same analogy with the congregation, right? Someone comes in, it's kind of like the inverse of going to a foreign city, right? Or a foreign country. It's like people are going to come in and I'm not going to feel comfortable. And, I'm getting to the age where I don't want to feel uncomfortable, right? And so I'm sympathetic to that. And I think that's the other thing that community does, right? Is we hold each other's hands and say, it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Right? We are here with you, and if we've moved too fast, we can slow down
adjust.
10 miles an hour.
Yeah.
We'll still get there. It will be efficient. We'll save gas.
Exactly.
Right?
But we have talked about this before, this idea that somehow we've conflated the idea of uncomfortability and danger.
Yes.
And that's a real problem because, well, sometimes they're true.
Sometimes it's
just
true.
very much the case. And there's a part of our brain back here that's dedicated to keeping us alive that says, no, that feels dangerous.
Yep.
And so, there is that moment where, especially when somebody different from us comes into the church, just like Paul is talking about, somebody who has different experiences, different culture, different everything else shows up and we go, this makes me uncomfortable, and therefore this person is dangerous.
Right.
And that is the line in the sand. The line in the sand is the gospel, right? Paul, I will say all things, I will do all things, I will be all things for the sake of the gospel. It's not everyone come in here and do things the way we've done it. These stupid Hellenizers coming in here, or these stupid Judaizers coming in. Paul was like, I will suit up for any team.
How do I welcome them?
How do I welcome them? And then
how
stop
does
fighting.
everybody have a seat at the table?
So he does want
and
change.
don't have 2 dinners.
He does want them to change.
He wants to change, but the people that are there do not, because they also came for a reason.
That's true.
They came for the reason, and the reason they came is because what was there attracted them, right? And if you change it, right, then what's there isn't attractive anymore. It's like it's like my trips to Vietnam, right? So I go to Vietnam, and that's. Every once in a while, I stay in a different neighborhood. It's like, oh my gosh, I don't know where my favorite banh mi is. I don't know where the coffee is, And there is that moment of anxiety. And then I discover another great banh mi shop, right? And it's not the banh mi that I knew over in that neighborhood, but it's still awfully good, right? Or I don't know where the coffee shop is, or I don't know, I can't say to where do I walk in the morning? So there's all these sorts of things, but we will find new ways.
With that curiosity and openness, we can do this.
Yes.
And it's when we close ourselves off and say, nope, that's when things fall apart.
Yeah. Where is the line?
Yeah.
And it's not Democrat, Republicans, or even whoever's in the White House this time.
Exactly.
That does not change how we do and what we do.
And that is in a period of time in which everything is politicized. It's almost that is the line in the sand I think the church needs to take. God is not a Democrat. God is not a Republican. We pray for the president, whoever it is.
Yeah.
And that is not easy, whichever side of that divide you are on these days. This idea that people that disagree with us, and this is why it is so important for the church to be the church right now.
Yes.
For us to demonstrate to the world that you can still sit next to someone, worship with someone, commune with someone, even though they voted differently from you. That someone else is not the enemy, and these things are all temporary. These things are all temporary.
As is the rest of the world that we live in.
Yes. That what's the world like? It's temporary. It pretends to be permanent. It pretends to be capital T truth. The world is not. Only the gospel is. Okay, well, let's go.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't get to preach this week.
So you got to at least live a little bit out. That's fine.
Yeah.
So it's been pent up.
Is that the actual pent in Pentapalooza?
We
probably should chop that out.
I led the discussion and she helped a lot. And
I was Phil Donahue.
She was Phil Donahue to
I
help.
was running around, was like, and then I wanted to do Oprah and say, and underneath your chairs, there's a communion cup. And everyone would squeal and look under.
Yes.
No.
Yep.
Probably not a great idea.
Yeah. So what are we talking about this week, guys? Great question. Glad you asked, right?
Yeah.
I think there were two things that were on our list, and maybe that's not what we're going to do. Terry said she would watch this video and get an idea of it. I mean, what we were thinking about was the question of what is prayer.
Right. What is prayer and what is worship, and why do we come together?
Why do we worship? Why do we bother to go to church? Why can't we just be spiritual but not religious?
Yeah. And a lot of that was bound around the question that you can be a Christian in some ways, but to be a faithful member of the body of Christ, you cannot do it alone.
Yes.
We need each other.
You can be spiritual and not religious. I think what I said,
but you
and I may ask them to cut this out, is like you can be spiritual but not religious, but then you're not a Christian. I mean, the reason we go to church is because this world is tempting. And because living the way God wants us to live is hard. It's hard to love each other. And we can't love each other unless there's other people supporting us in that. It's hard to be open and affirming. It's hard to change. And we need people around that will help us do that. And we can't do it otherwise. That's what I think.
There's just so much of the world that there's that part of your brain that fears the other, that fears other things, also is the same part of your brain that says, I want comfort, I want warmth, and I want to not have to work for it.
Yes.
Right.
Give it to me.
Yeah. And so there is that space where we want to say, all right, the things that the gospel calls us to do are not easy, and we have to share the load or else we will drop it.
I mean, it's like the world is the comment section on basically any social media.
Don't look at the comments.
And I start reading the comments, and sometimes I get this rage bait, and I want to know their address so I can just go just stop them. So bad person, stop that.
Roll up the newspaper.
Yeah, and it's like we need a community to say that's not. We need a community. I mean, this is what I get from my church, and there are people in my church who are living, breathing embodiments of the gospel, right? And I want to look at them. When I get angry, there are people in my head, and I think, some people might think, what would Jesus do? I have, what would,
You're more concrete.
Yeah, what would this person do? And I have seen these people. There's more than one people in that congregation. Yeah. I have seen them embody God's love and grace. Yeah. And without the church, I could not. And without the church, I would be hunting people down the road and hit them over the nose with a rolled up newspaper.
Yeah. So the question is the temptation going out and finding people to or is the temptation even reading the comment section at all?
I think I really want to scroll. I like doom scrolling. I like getting angry.
The trouble is when you can argue that is engagement with the people and engagement exactly as we've been talking about.
But I think it's a line in the sand. It becomes such a pollution.
Oh yeah.
Right? It becomes such a pollution. Is it possible that I could come to a point in my life where I can read some of the stupid things that people say and do for each other and not become enraged? Maybe.
Not there yet.
But I don't even want to be there. I think, but that's not what the church is supposed to do. The church is supposed to come over here so that if you're sitting there and you're spending some of your time in the comment section, the world, and you're spending the rest of your time in church feeling loved and affirmed and open and a sense of purpose and a sense of grace, that who would choose the comment section? I mean, maybe today or tomorrow, maybe once in a while if I'm in a bad mood, I'll read it so I can let go of my rage. But I think that
You
what
can direct it into
happens is
something that's not.
yes,
Yeah,
yes,
okay.
and then eventually you'll think of the way you feel when you're in the world, and you'll think of the way that you feel when you're in the church, and not just worship, but the church, and you'll think, I never want to go there again.
Yeah.
It's like imagine it's like being in love for the first time. Why would you go back to that disgusting relationship that you were in over there? Yeah. This person treats me well, loves me and affirms me. No, I want to go back to the person that belittled me all the time.
And because we are used to beating metaphors till they're dead, we know how many people go back with their exes.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
And that's why the church has to continue to exist.
Yeah.
With the belief that people will say, I don't want to live this way.
I don't want to live in the comment section.
Yes, I don't want to live in the comment section. That's the world. I want to live in a place where people, I'm trying to think, the list that Paul has, where we affirm each other, where we support each other, where no one goes hungry, where this is what the church community is like. And if you want to live out there in a place where everyone's value is based on how much stuff they have,
And how loud you can be.
and how loud you can be, and how many people you can bully,
Yeah.
and how obnoxious you can be, and where being a jerk is considered to be a badge of honor. You do that. The world is out there. There it is. No one's stopping you. But when you're done, we'll be here.
Yeah.
And I honestly, and this is my naivete, I honestly believe that people will choose the church.
I would hope so. And I would hope so if they have seen it and experienced it first, that they know that this is what it is. And the trouble is that I know that the church and the church, there are some parts of the church that thrive and run and are fueled by that exact same comment section anger.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so my fear in this one is that those people who have seen the church is just the comment section with a cross
Mm-hmm.
Right.
are not going to come to us who are trying to say, no, this is a place of wholeness and health, of welcome and forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
And communicate.
And so how do we communicate that to these people? No, we are not that church. Because, well, the trouble is that when we talk about the church,
Everyone thinks of that church.
Yeah.
and we are still part of that church. The church is united whether or not we can see it or not, right?
Yeah, and the interesting thing is that, it's really easy to point our fingers. And this is where, God bless Paul. This is where Paul, and he did. And this is where, Paul always said, I was the sinner.
Yeah.
I was the worst of it. I was the one. You don't worry about the log in your, opposite side of the political spectrum neighbor's eye, or the speck when you've got a log in yours. And I can see this on both the left and the right. The demonizing of the other side. The demonizing of whether it's conservative Christianity talking about, baby killers and people that hate America and people that hate Christ on one side, or, a progressive Christianity that's like, oh, the world is falling apart and we need to bunker up and defend ourselves from, it's like, no. That's not, again, Christ didn't come walking out of the temple with Pontius Pilate with a big, with a big stick.
Yeah.
Right? And I was like, okay, kill me.
Yeah.
I was probably not as enthusiastic as I just made it sound, but
I think there's some arguments to be made about Gethsemane and some other places, but we won't worry about that too much.
Yeah.
But I think, there is a point where it's not just the fight between the two sides that's the problem. It's the creation of the two sides at all.
Exactly.
It's that separation to say, I'm not like you, and so I'm going to roll up newspaper, right?
Yeah.
And so it goes even further back
With
than
me
the
again.
separation to the fight between the two sides, so much as it is the argument that we are somehow different from those other people.
and that's where it comes back to that fear.
Yes.
The fear of difference. I lost my pen, it's like I'm dying.
Or becoming like, even. not
Yes.
even so much as the difference, but if I come to the middle and create that conversation and that openness, what do I lose of myself? And this is who I am, identity wise.
Yeah. But next week, what are we talking
What
about?
are we talking about next week? Well, and I think there's a lot of space here to talk about what does the community, I don't want to use the word provide, that's the word that's in my head, but what does the community make happen in your life that does not happen without that community?
But I think that the question, and I'm trying to think back to when we were putting this together, it's not just why we need the church. I think we've kind of beaten that a little bit over the past 4 weeks. But why worship?
Okay.
Why do we need? I mean, this is just my question.
Right.
Yeah. So okay. So we know why we need the church. We need the church because it's a tough world out there. But why do we worship? What is the purpose of prayer? Are we convincing God? Are we sometimes I bribe God.
That's a dangerous path to start walking down.
Yeah. Well, so far God has not taken me up on any of my offers.
But worship
That's probably
allows
a good
us
thing.
not only community amongst ourselves, but we're also in a very structured way communing with God. And,
Yes.
especially when we look at the order of worship or the things that we find important in our orders of worship,
Yes.
we welcome each other. Then we have some sort of prayer of confession or forgiveness. Looks different in different churches, but it's basically there. We make contact with the scripture, compare it with Old and New Testament readings, finding those comparisons and contrasts. This is the old, again, back to that old world, new world. We do that every week in a liturgy.
Yeah.
And and then, depending on your denomination, you have communion. And again, uniting our spirit with God's spirit as we, and preparing ourselves for the coming week in unison with the Spirit of God. And so,
because the church is not just another social group.
right.
It's not the else.
And it's not even a support group.
It's not a support group. It's not a social justice or whatever social. It's a God is there.
Right.
Right. God is a part of this, and so I mean this is the UCC is a congregational church. We have a covenantal polity, right? That everything comes from everything that we do. We covenant with one another to do. Right? If a pastor comes in, the pastor basically makes a covenant with the congregation. I will be your pastor. I'll do this. You'll do this. This covenant. But I think that the distinction is that God also covenants.
Yes.
Right? God covenants with us first on Mount Sinai, right? And then again in the new covenant, right? In the body and blood. And I think that part of what happens when we're worshiping is we are reminding ourselves of our promise to God and God's promise to us.
Yes.
Because one of the things we've talked about before is that we are the people who keep promises.
And God is the God who makes promises and who keeps promises. And because we are the people who break promises.
Also true.
And so that's why we need to come to church to remind ourselves of what we've promised. I mean, this is like the whole story of Israel, right? It's like, just yesterday you said, and all of a sudden I come back and you're hanging out with every Tom, Dick, and Baal, Right?
This is sounding once again more like this is therapy, an intervention. The church is an intervention for those of us who completely who are addicted to the world and addicted to the comment section. And who would like to not be addicted to the world anymore, and so we have to come to therapy every week.
So worship then is an opportunity to renew ourselves for being in not the old world but the new world, it's also it's also an opportunity to remind ourselves that it's not just us, it's God. But there's also confession, there's a hearing of the word. Yeah, it might also be an opportunity. I'm kind of thinking out loud here because I don't have to, I'm going to be gone this Sunday. But it might also be an opportunity to reflect on, well, what did the first church think they were doing? Why were they getting together? And I don't, there's some hints in the text, but this might be an opportunity to sneak outside of the chosen liturgy, which is never written in stone, to think about, well, why did they get together, right? Well, we get together to renew each other, to support each other, to have a meal together, and from the very first, they went just to hang out. And I think that sometimes I know I'm guilty of it myself. I'm a little judgy of people that just come to church to hang out. But that is from the very beginning.
Yeah.
It's tough out there. We're being persecuted.
Gather together and lock the doors.
Gather together and lock the doors. Or think of the hush harbors in the South during slavery, where slaves would sneak out to be together to worship the master's God, right? And to covenant with God and to believe the promises. And they had to sneak out to do it. But they did it.
But they did.
Right? To have that moment of praise and worship and reassurance and promise.
Which fits back into that question of what are we willing to sacrifice so that we can do this?
Yeah.
And I don't know, we don't really have to sacrifice too much to do it anymore, but people who have in the past really sacrificed, put themselves into danger and said, this is so important that we're willing to do this. And I mean, we drift back into that judgy world and we say, and you don't want to get out of your nice, big, soft, king-size bed on Sunday morning.
Yeah, right.
And I don't want to drift into that judgy place, but there is still this idea that people have sacrificed, put themselves in danger, really worked very difficult for this gift of coming together with other people to worship, to pray, and to leave in a better place, better people.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is the downside of a accommodationist church.
Yeah.
Right? It's like eventually you realize that you're not doing anything in church that you couldn't do anywhere else. Yeah. And you don't have to get up early on Sunday morning to do it everywhere else. And so I think that this is, and I don't have an answer, and I'm glad I'm not preaching this Sunday. Poor Terry.
She's not even here for this, so.
Yeah, she's gonna watch.
Okay.
So the purpose of worship, I think I have more questions right now than answers about the purpose of worship and the purpose of prayer. But hopefully we'll have some answers next week. Or at least better questions.
Better questions. That's all we can hope for.
Yep.